For over 4 years, we've thrown every sanction in the book at Russia. Yet the tanks keep rolling. The reason is surprisingly simple. Tanks don't run on imagination, they run on money. And Russia has kept its war machine moving by finding new buyers for its massive reserves of crude oil and natural gas. Senator Lindsey Graham drafted a strategy that moved past previous sanctions, focusing on the external trade routes that direct penalties could not reach. But just days after meeting with Ukraine's president in Kyiv to discuss this exact strategy, Graham suddenly died. Normally, when a bill loses its chief architect, it dies quietly in committee. Instead, his sudden passing acted as an accelerant. Lawmakers rushed to fast-track what is now known as his legacy legislation, an untested strategy to starve the conflict. This new legislation completely discards the traditional sanctions model.
Instead of trying to punish Moscow directly, it turns around and delivers a strict ultimatum to Moscow's customers. Take a look at this breakdown. The original draft of the bill proposed a massive, flat 500% tariff on 63 different nations. The revised version is much more surgical. It zeroes in on just the top 5 global purchasers of Russian oil, threatening them with tariffs of up to 100%. It also builds in a steep hatch. Countries that import less than 15% of their gas from Russia and can prove they are actively cutting that number are completely exempt. By giving those smaller allies a pass, the legislation backs the absolute worst offenders into a corner. They have to make a choice: keep buying cheap Russian energy or maintain affordable access to the American market. This strategy weaponizes the global supply chain. It forces nations that have tried to stay economically neutral right onto the active front lines of the conflict. While the main threat is global, the legislation still hits hard at Russia's domestic infrastructure, aiming straight for its financial core. It mandates strict, unavoidable penalties on the state's largest financial institutions, specifically targeting Sberbank and the Central Bank of Russia. And it looks ahead to choke off future revenue, specifically targeting massive, long-term energy megaprojects like the ongoing Arctic LNG developments. But the real teeth of this bill lie in its legal structure. Past sanctions were built almost entirely on temporary presidential executive orders. This bill writes those penalties directly into federal law. It removes the unpredictable element of the presidential mood, ensuring that the economic pressure cannot be quietly erased with the stroke of a pen during a future backroom negotiation. The mechanics of this legislation function as a direct economic ultimatum aimed squarely at Beijing and New Delhi. This chart shows Russian seaborne crude flowing to global buyers. China and India purchase over 80%, acting as the primary financial engine for the Kremlin. Compare that to the US, accounting for less than 1%. American tariffs alone barely make a dent. Because of that severe imbalance, Washington has almost no direct leverage left. The only way this strategy works is if the threat of secondary tariffs forces China and India into severe financial distress. This sets up a massive proxy showdown. The entire plan relies on whether the US can make it too expensive for Russia's 2 most powerful allies to keep doing business. A central tension remains. Will 2 of the world's largest economies actually stop their oil purchases when faced with these American tariffs? On one hand, Beijing and New Delhi might simply decide to eat the cost. They could absorb the financial hit to protect their alliance with Moscow, meaning this new law would fail just like the others. But on the other hand, 100% markup on trade might prove too devastating. If the financial pain forces them to halt their oil shipments, the war's primary fuel supply completely dries up. Even if this legislation passes tomorrow, it will not end the conflict overnight. What it does, however, is introduce an aggressive, untested tactic in global economic warfare. By putting the pressure directly on the buyers instead of the seller, this legacy bill marks the first time the global supply chain has been squeezed hard enough to make the Kremlin's financial math stop adding up.